The rain lashed against the windshield as I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. The city streets blurred past in streaks of neon and darkness, my heart pounding in sync with the wiper's frantic rhythm. I knew where I was going. I knew what I was about to see. And yet, a part of me still clung to the faint hope that I was wrong. Sherry had been distant for months. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in her appearance, the whispers into her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, it had all been leading to this moment. I had ignored the signs for too long, believing in the illusion of our 10-year marriage, convincing myself that her vows still meant something. But the truth had a way of revealing itself, whether I was ready or not. Jake Sloan, my private investigator, had been thorough. He had provided more than enough evidence to crush any lingering doubt. The photos, the messages, the carefully documented timeline of deception, it was all there in stark black and white. My wife was having an affair. And not just an affair, but one meticulously planned, every detail executed with cold precision. Her lover, Todd, was everything I wasn't. Younger, cocky, a smooth talker who oozed false confidence. He worked with her at the firm, a man I had shaken hands with more times than I could count, never once suspecting that his hands had also been on my wife's body. I pulled up outside the hotel, my stomach twisting in knots as I killed the engine. The Constellation Hotel. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. Sherry had once told me that she loved me. To the stars and back. Now, she was up in one of those dimly lit rooms, giving herself to another man. I wasn't here to confront her. Not yet. No, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I needed the image burned into my mind so that I could never again entertain the fantasy that she was still mine. I stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through my jacket as I moved toward the entrance. The doorman barely glanced at me as I walked in, the marble floors gleaming under the chandeliers. I knew their room number. Jake had given me every detail. Room 1213. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. My breath was shallow, my pulse hammering against my ribs. With each passing floor, the rage inside me coiled tighter, threatening to snap. And then I was there. The hallway was eerily quiet, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. I stood outside the door, my fingers curling into a fist before I forced myself to relax. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. The sound coming from inside was enough. Soft moans. Sherry's voice. The unmistakable rhythm of bodies moving together. My world collapsed in that instant. I could have walked away. I could have spared myself the final blow. But I had come too far for that. So, I reached for the handle and turned it. The door wasn't locked. And what I saw inside would haunt me forever. The door swung open soundlessly, the dim hotel room bathed in the golden glow of a bedside lamp. The air was thick with the scent of sex, the humidity of sweat and perfume mingling into something sickeningly familiar. My stomach clenched. There she was. My wife. Sherry lay sprawled across the sheets, her skin flushed, her auburn hair tangled in the grip of Todd's hands. His body was pressed against hers, their limbs entwined in a tangle of betrayal. My mind struggled to reconcile the image before me with the woman I had vowed to love, the woman who had once whispered forever into my ear. She hadn't seen me yet. Either of them had. They were too wrapped up in their own world, too lost in their pleasure to notice the storm standing in the doorway. But then I spoke. "Enjoying yourselves?" The words sliced through the room like a whip, snapping them both out of their fevered haze. Sherry's eyes shot open, and for a moment, all I saw was sheer, naked terror. Todd scrambled upright, his expression flipping between panic and arrogance, as if he couldn't decide whether to run or act like he belonged there. Sherry grabbed at the sheets, dragging them up to cover herself. As if that would erase what I had already seen. As if that would make any difference now. Jake, she stammered, her voice cracking. "It's not what it looks like." A bitter laugh tore from my throat, raw and venomous. "Not what it looks like." Todd had the audacity to clear his throat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Listen, man." I cut him off with a single step forward. "Don't. Speak." He flinched. Good. I wanted him to be afraid. I turned my gaze back to Sherry, the woman who had lied to my face for months, maybe years. The woman who had kissed me before work, held my hand at family gatherings, and made love to me while carrying this disgusting secret inside her. How long? My voice was eerily calm, colder than I felt. How long have you been screwing him? Sherry shook her head rapidly, her fingers clutching the sheets like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. Jake, please. I took another step forward. How long? Her lip trembled. And then, finally, she broke. 6 months, she whispered. The rage inside me, the boiling fury that had been simmering for weeks, months, maybe even years, reached its breaking point. My fists clenched at my sides as I inhaled slowly, trying to keep myself from shattering completely. 6 months, I repeated, tasting the words like poison on my tongue. 6 months of lying to my face. 6 months of coming home to me, of letting me hold you, of pretending this, we still meant something to you. Tears pooled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not pity. Not sympathy. Just rage. Todd, the spineless coward, decided to open his mouth again. Look, dude, I didn't mean for this to happen. I turned on him so fast he barely had time to react. Before he could finish that pathetic excuse of a sentence, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the floor like the worthless piece of shit he was. Sherry screamed. Todd groaned, clutching his face, his eyes wide with shock. He clearly hadn't expected that. Jake! Sherry gasped, lunging toward me, her hands grabbing at my arm. Stop! Please! I wrenched free of her touch like it burned. She didn't get to touch me. Not anymore. You threw away 10 years for him? I spat, gesturing to the man groaning on the floor, the man who had just been buried inside my wife. Sherry's sobs came harder now, her face a mess of regret and shame. But I wasn't here to comfort her. I wasn't here to save her from the disaster she had created. I stepped back, shaking my head in disgust. You don't even get to cry, Sherry. You don't get to act like a victim. Her mouth opened, desperate to say something, anything, to undo this moment. But nothing she could say would ever fix this. Nothing. I turned on my heel, walking out of that room, leaving them exactly where they belong. In the wreckage of what they destroyed. I didn't stop walking. Not as Sherry's sobs echoed behind me, not as Todd groaned from where he lay sprawled on the floor, not even when the hotel staff shot me nervous glances as I passed through the lobby. The rage inside me was ice now, cold, sharp, and lethal. I had come here for proof, and now that I had it, the next step was simple. Burn everything down. I drove through the storm, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed what I had just witnessed, every disgusting detail seared into my memory like a brand. Sherry, moaning beneath him. Sherry, looking at him the way she used to look at me. Sherry, choosing him. I slammed my palm against the dashboard, a guttural growl of frustration ripping from my throat. 6 months. 6 months of stolen moments. 6 months of whispered lies. 6 months of being made a fool. But I wasn't the fool anymore. By the time I pulled into the driveway of our home, the one I had built, the one I had paid for, the one that she had defiled, I had a plan forming. This wasn't going to be a normal divorce. No, I was going to make sure Sherry lost everything. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of home suddenly making my stomach turn. This house had once been a sanctuary. Now it was a crime scene. I walked straight to the bedroom, ignoring the framed photos of us lining the hallway. Lies, all of them. I reached into the closet, grabbing my suitcase and throwing it onto the bed. I wasn't the one who had cheated, but I sure as hell wasn't staying in this house another night. I stuffed clothes into the bag with practiced efficiency, my mind already moving 3 steps ahead. Bank accounts. The house. Her reputation. By the time I was done with her, Sherry wouldn't have a damn thing left. A knock at the front door made me freeze. I exhaled sharply, already knowing who it was. She followed me home. Slowly, I walked back to the living room, steeling myself before yanking the door open. Sherry stood there, drenched from the rain, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Jake, please," she whispered. I said nothing. Just stared. She looked so small now, so pathetic. The woman who had ripped my heart out with her bare hands was now standing before me, trembling like a child caught stealing. "Can we talk?" she tried again. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms over my chest. "Talk?" My voice was flat, emotionless. "Oh, now you want to talk?" She winced. I wasn't thinking straight. I don't even know why I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. "Bullshit. You knew exactly what you were doing. For 6 months, Sherry. Don't stand here in my doorway acting like it was some goddamn mistake." She shuddered at my words. "Good. Let her feel it. I love you," she blurted out. A muscle in my jaw twitched. "You don't love me, Sherry." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a lethal whisper. "You love the comfort I gave you. The security. You love knowing I was always going to be here, no matter how many times you spread your legs for him." Her face crumpled. "It wasn't just about that. I don't care." My voice thundered through the doorway, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "Good. She should be afraid. You made your choice," I hissed. "Now you get to live with it." Her lip trembled. Are you leaving me?" I laughed again, shaking my head. "You don't get to ask that question, Sherry. You left me the moment you let him inside you." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. She had killed whatever love I had for her. Now there was only hate. I stepped back and slammed the door in her face. This was just the beginning. I stood in the silent house, the weight of what had just happened pressing against my chest like a slab of concrete. She had stood on the porch for a few minutes after I slammed the door in her face. I heard her sobbing, heard the pathetic, broken whispers of my name through the wood. But I didn't open it. I didn't even move. And then, finally, she left. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved. I was angry. I turned away from the door and grabbed my phone, my hand steady as I scrolled through my contacts. There was one person who needed to hear this first. Todd's wife. Her name was Rebecca Sinclair. I had met her only once, at some work function Sherry had dragged me to. She was polite, reserved, the opposite of my wife. I remembered thinking that she and Todd made an odd pair. Now I understood why. She was too good for him. I tapped her name and hit call. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice groggy. "Hello?" I glanced at the clock. 1:43 a.m. I didn't care. "Rebecca," I said, my voice like steel. "This is Jake." A pause. Then a confused, "Jake?" "Jake Connors. Sherry's husband." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "What is this about?" she finally asked, her voice tight. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Your husband has been fucking my wife for the last 6 months." Silence. Then a shaky, "What?" "I just caught them in a hotel room," I said, pacing the living room. "I have photos. Proof. If you want to see them, I'll send them to you right now." A small gasp. And then, the sound of a woman's world shattering. She didn't cry. Not at first. Maybe she was too stunned. Maybe she was still trying to process the reality of it. Finally, she whispered, "Are you sure?" I almost laughed. "I walked in on them, Rebecca. I watched it happen." Her breath hitched. I could hear her trying to hold herself together. Trying and failing. I waited. Gave her time. Let the silence stretch. Then, in a quiet, dangerous voice, she asked, "Where are they now?" I smirked. Good. She was already thinking about revenge. "Todd's probably still in that hotel room, nursing his busted face," I said. "And Sherry just left my house." Another silence. Then, in a tone I almost didn't recognize, Rebecca said, "Send me the photos." I sent them. Less than 30 seconds later, I heard her sharp inhale through the phone. A muffled sob. Then, nothing. She had hung up. Good. Let her process it. Let her rage build. I wasn't done yet. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, letting the burn settle in my chest as I sat on the couch. I had already texted my lawyer. First thing in the morning, we were filing for divorce. And I wasn't going to make it easy for her. The house? Mine. The bank accounts? Mine. Her reputation? Burnt to the fucking ground. This wasn't about just leaving her. This was about destroying her. And I was just getting started. At 3:27 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "I'm in. Let's ruin them." I grinned. Game on. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my lawyer. "Meeting set for noon. Bring everything." Perfect. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. The house was eerily quiet, no smell of coffee brewing, no soft hum of Sherry's morning routine. Just silence. Good. That's how it should be. She had texted me 3 times last night. "Sherry, Jake, please, let's talk." "Sherry, I messed up, but we can fix this." "Sherry, please don't make any rash decisions." I didn't respond. I wasn't going to. There was nothing left to fix. Instead, I grabbed my phone and sent a single message to Rebecca. "Meet me at my lawyer's office at 11:30. I have a plan." Setting the trap. Rebecca was already waiting outside the office when I pulled up. She looked different. Gone was the quiet, reserved woman I had met before. This Rebecca was cold, calculated. A woman who had nothing left to lose. She climbed into my car without a word. We sat in silence for a moment before she finally spoke. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I smirked. "Rebecca, I don't just want to go through with it. I want to bury them." A slow smile spread across her lips. "Good. So do I." I handed her a folder. Inside are copies of every bank statement, every text message, every late-night charge to the Constellation Hotel. "Todd's been using your joint account to pay for his little dates." She flipped through the pages, her fingers tightening with every passing second. "That son of a bitch." "Oh, it gets better," I said, leaning back against the headrest. "Sherry doesn't know it yet, but I'm having her served today. And since she doesn't work, she's going to lose everything." Rebecca exhaled sharply. "I'm filing, too. But I don't just want to divorce him. I want to make sure he's ruined." That was the exact moment I knew we were on the same page. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the real weapon. A flash drive. "What's this?" she asked. I grinned. "Security footage." Rebecca's eyes widened. "From where?" "The hotel. I had my PI pull strings. Every single one of their meetups is on there. Time-stamped." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, this is going to be fun." I nodded. "We're not just divorcing them, Rebecca. We're making sure they lose everything." She reached over, shaking my hand. "Let's do it." At exactly 1:15 p.m., Sherry walked into the house. I was sitting in the living room, waiting. Calm. Ready. She hesitated at the door, eyes red from crying. "Jake, we need to talk." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Yeah, we do." She let out a relieved breath, stepping closer. "I made a mistake." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "Save it." She froze. "Sit down, Sherry." She hesitated. "Jake, please, I stood up, looming over her. "Sit down." For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked afraid of me. "Good." She sat. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the divorce papers. Slapped them onto the coffee table. Her lips parted in shock. "Jake, what is this?" I leaned in, my voice low and deadly. "This is the price of betrayal." Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers. She flipped through them, her breath hitching when she saw the details. Full asset transfer? She gasped. You're taking everything? I smirked. That's what happens when you destroy a marriage, sweetheart. Tears welled in her eyes. Jake, please, But I wasn't done. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. She stared at it, confused. What's that? I tossed it onto the table. That, Sherry, is footage of every single time you and Todd fucked in that hotel. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You don't just lose me, I continued, my voice ice cold. You lose everything. The house. The cars. The life I built for you. She shook her head rapidly. No, you can't do this. Oh, but I can, I said, standing up. And I already have. She choked back a sob. Jake, please. I turned my back on her. And then, just as she thought it couldn't get any worse, her phone rang. She hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then, Rebecca? Another pause. Then, suddenly, Sherry's face crumpled in horror. I already knew what Rebecca was telling her. That Todd was about to be served his own divorce papers. That he was losing everything, too. Sherry's hand fell from her ear. Her phone clattered to the floor. I smirked. Checkmate. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing everything. Sherry sat there, phone forgotten on the floor, her body trembling. It was over. Everything she thought she could salvage, our marriage, our life, the security she had taken for granted, was gone. I stood above her, watching as the reality set in. She had played a dangerous game and lost. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She was too stunned to even cry properly. Good. Let her feel it. You ruined us, Sherry, I said quietly, each word precise and sharp. You thought you could have your fun and come back home like nothing happened. Her hands clenched into fists. No. I cut her off. You don't get to speak. You don't get to explain. You don't get to beg. She flinched, and I took a step closer, towering over her. You killed this marriage, I whispered. And now you get to watch it burn. She sucked in a shaky breath. Jake, please. Don't do this. I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Don't do this? I echoed mockingly. Sherry, you did this. You destroyed our home. You destroyed our vows. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. I grabbed my keys from the table and turned for the door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stopped, glancing at her over my shoulder. Out, I said. Unlike you, I don't have to sneak around in hotel rooms. If I want to fuck someone else, I'll do it without lying about it. The words hit her like a slap. Her face crumpled, a sob ripping from her throat. Jake, don't. Slam. I walked out, letting the door close behind me. I never wanted to see her face again. I drove to a bar across town. A place neither Sherry nor I had ever been to, somewhere I could drink in peace. Rebecca was already there, waiting for me in a booth at the back. She looked different. No tears. No heartbreak. Just focus. I slid into the seat across from her. Well? She asked, stirring her drink. She's wrecked, I said. I left her sobbing in the living room. Rebecca's lips curled into a smirk. Todd's losing it too. I had him served right at his office. I chuckled darkly. Bet that was a fun scene. Oh, you have no idea. She took a sip of her drink. He tried calling me 10 times. Left voicemails begging me to talk it out. I raised an eyebrow. Did you answer? She laughed. Of course not. But I did send him one last text. I leaned in. What did you say? Her smirk widened. I fucked your best friend. I choked on my drink, laughing so hard I almost knocked over the glass. Holy shit, Rebecca. She shrugged, looking satisfied. He cheated on me for 6 months. I just made sure he'd never sleep again. I shook my head, still grinning. Remind me never to get on your bad side. She raised her glass. To getting revenge. I clinked my drink against hers. To ruining them. When I got home that night, Sherry was gone. The house was eerily silent. No lights, no movement, just emptiness. I walked through the living room, pausing when I saw the divorce papers on the coffee table. Signed. A sticky note was attached. Jake, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve it. I'm leaving. I won't fight you on the divorce. I won't take anything. I ruined us. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Sherry. I stared at the note for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. This was the end. And for the first time in months, I felt free. The house was silent, the air thick with the absence of her. Sherry was gone. For the first time in 10 years, I had the place to myself, and yet, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like the shell of a life I no longer recognized. The walls still held the memories of laughter, of whispered promises, of nights spent tangled together in sheets that now felt like lies. I poured myself a drink, letting the burn settle deep in my chest. The divorce papers sat on the counter, signed and waiting. All I had to do was file them. A part of me thought I'd feel relief. But all I felt was emptiness. Enraged.my phone buzzed. Rebecca. Rebecca, check the news. It's happening. I frowned, grabbing the remote and flipping through the channels until I found what she was talking about. Todd Sinclair, a senior executive at Harper & Davis, has been terminated following allegations of financial misconduct. I smirked. The financial misconduct was bullshit, of course. Rebecca and I had made sure of that. It was the perfect excuse for his company to cut him loose, an internal investigation, some missing funds, and suddenly Todd was unemployed and unemployable. The camera panned to a shot of Todd walking out of his office building, his face a mask of absolute defeat. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca, one down. One to go. I took a long sip of my drink. Sherry was next. 2 days later, I saw her again. I hadn't planned on it, but as I walked into my lawyer's office to finalize the paperwork, there she was, waiting in the lobby. She looked like hell. Her once pristine appearance was gone, replaced by swollen eyes, disheveled hair, and the hollow look of a woman who had lost everything. She stood as I approached, her hands trembling. Jake! I didn't stop walking. Jake, please, she begged, stepping in front of me. Just talk to me. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved, and felt nothing. You don't exist to me anymore, I said coldly. Her lip trembled. Jake, I stepped around her, walking into my lawyer's office. And just like that I was free. That night I sat on my back porch, staring out at the dark sky. No more lies. No more pretending. No more Sherry. My phone buzzed. Rebecca again. Rebecca, drink? I hesitated. Then I typed back. Me, yeah? Let's celebrate. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving the past behind me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. The bar was dimly lit, filled with the quiet hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. I spotted Rebecca immediately. She was seated at a booth in the back, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her whiskey glass. She looked up as I approached, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. Well, look who finally decided to start living. I slid into the seat across from her, signaling the waitress for a drink. Might as well. It's not like I have a wife to go home to. She chuckled. Neither do I. For a few seconds, we just sat there, studying each other. Rebecca had changed in the last few days. Gone was the devastated woman whose life had just been torn apart. Now she carried herself with a confidence I hadn't seen before. A woman reborn. She leaned forward, her eyes glinting. So tell me, Jake, what's next? I took a sip of my drink, considering. For the first time in a long time, I had no fucking idea. One drink turned into two. 2 turned into 4. By the time the bars started thinning out, Rebecca and I were laughing. Really laughing. It had been so long since I felt light. Since I wasn't drowning in rage, or betrayal, or the burning need for revenge. She leaned in close, her perfume intoxicating. You know, I used to think I had my life figured out. I scoffed. Yeah? What changed? She smiled, a slow, wicked thing. You tell me. I didn't get the chance to respond before she closed the distance between us. Her lips crashed against mine. It was heat. It was fury. It was 2 people who had lost everything, who had burned their lives to the ground, and who needed to feel something real. I should have stopped it. I didn't. I kissed her back. Rebecca's hotel room was only a few blocks away. Neither of us spoke as we stumbled inside, hands grasping, clothes falling to the floor in a frenzy. It wasn't love. It wasn't even comfort. It was 2 people drowning, clawing at each other for air. Her nails raked down my back as I pinned her against the mattress, her breathy moans filling the silence. I didn't think about Sherry. I didn't think about Todd. I didn't think about anything. For the first time in months, I was numb. And I fucking needed it. Sunlight streamed through the cheap hotel curtains, slashing across the tangled sheets. I blinked against the light, my head pounding. Rebecca lay beside me, her bare back rising and falling with each slow breath. Fuck. Reality crashed into me like a freight train. I wasn't angry. I wasn't regretful. But I wasn't sure I felt anything at all. I slipped out of bed, grabbing my jeans and yanking them on. Rebecca stirred, her voice husky with sleep. Leaving already? I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Yeah. I need to clear my head. She smirked, propping herself up on one elbow. Well, if you ever need a distraction again. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my keys and walked out. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had already made my decision. This wasn't over. Sherry was gone. Todd was ruined. But something inside me still wasn't satisfied. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for destruction. And I knew exactly where to start. I sat in my car, staring at the house I once called home. Sherry was gone. The divorce was in motion. But the fire inside me still burned. It wasn't enough. I needed to see her break. Not just lose our marriage, I wanted her entire world to collapse. And I knew exactly how to do it. Rebecca had done most of the work taking down Todd. He was unemployed, drowning in debt, and about to lose his house. But Sherry? She still had a life to go back to. Not for long. I picked up my phone and made the call. Jake? The voice on the other end was Sherry's boss. Hey, Richard. Got a minute? A pause. Then, cautiously. What's this about? I leaned back in my seat, smirking. I think you should know what your senior accounts manager has been doing on company time. I sent the email. The one with all the proof. Hotel receipts. Credit card statements. Time-stamped photos. Every single instance where Sherry had used her company card for her affair with Todd. Richard was silent for a long time. Then a quiet, son of a bitch. Bingo. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. Are you telling me Sherry was using company money for this? He asked, his voice tight. She expensed hotel stays and dinners with Todd as client meetings. I confirmed. I figured you'd want to know before the auditors did. Silence. Then, a sharp exhale. Jake. I appreciate this. Translation? Sherry was about to get fired. I parked outside her apartment, waiting. It didn't take long. At exactly 4:52 p.m., I saw her car pull up. She stepped out, moving like a woman whose entire world had just imploded. Tear-streaked cheeks. Trembling hands. A broken woman. She saw me before I even got out of the car. Her lips parted. Jake. I smirked. Rough day? She swallowed hard, shaking her head. You did this. I shrugged. You did it to yourself. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. You got me fired, Jake. I leaned against my car, crossing my arms. You stole from your company to fund your affair. What did you think was going to happen? Tears welled in her eyes. I tilted my head. Let me guess. Todd won't return your calls? She flinched. Bingo. I took a slow step forward, letting my voice drop to a whisper. Now you have nothing. Her breath hitched. Jake, please. I just stared at her. This was what she deserved. She lost me. She lost our house. She lost Todd. She lost everything. And now, she stood there, shaking, realizing that she had no one left. Perfect. I stepped back, smirking. Have a good life, Sherry. Then I got in my car and drove away. She didn't chase me. She didn't beg. She just stood there. Alone. Exactly where she deserved to be. I pulled into Rebecca's driveway an hour later. She was waiting on the porch, 2 whiskey glasses in hand. I climbed out of the car, walking up the steps. Well? She asked, handing me a drink. I took a sip, exhaling slowly. She's done. Rebecca smiled, raising her glass. To ruining them. I clinked my glass against hers. To moving the fuck on. The whiskey burned as it slid down my throat, but it wasn't unpleasant. It was a reminder, a celebration. Rebecca and I sat in comfortable silence on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Sherry was gone. Todd was ruined. And I was free. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something told me to look. Sherry. I smirked, debating whether I should even read it. In the end, curiosity won. Sherry, I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. But I just need to say this. I'm sorry. Not because I lost everything, not because you made sure I have nothing left, but because I broke the one good thing I ever had. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. I stared at the message for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. I had nothing left to say to her. Sherry? Rebecca asked, noticing my expression. I nodded. Final attempt at an apology. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Too little, too late. Exactly. I took another sip of whiskey, exhaling slowly. The rage was gone. The need for revenge had burned itself out. What was left? Something new. I glanced at Rebecca, watching the way the fading sunlight highlighted the sharp angles of her face. She caught me staring and smirked. What? I shrugged. You ever think about what comes next? She raised an eyebrow. For me? Or for us? I didn't answer. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't know. And for the first time, I was okay with that. Sherry left town not long after. Last I heard, she was living in a tiny apartment in some nowhere city, waiting tables. A long fall from the life she thought she'd always have. Todd tried to rebuild, but after losing his job, his house, and Rebecca's money, he faded into irrelevance. As for me, I moved on. Not overnight. Not without scars. But with each passing day, the past lost its grip on me. And Rebecca? Well, that's a story for another time.